Have you ever wondered why certain people can devastate you emotionally, while others can't touch you at all? What if I told you that emotional pain isn't something that happens to you, but something you unconsciously permit? This is Carl Jung's radical proposition, that our suffering often represents an invitation we unknowingly extend. In his groundbreaking work, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung suggests that our psychological wounds aren't random attacks, but precise strikes at the fortress doors we've left unguarded. Think of it like this. You don't feel pain when someone steps on your shadow, but you certainly do when they step on your foot. Your emotional triggers work the same way. They're not universal truths. They're your unique vulnerabilities. The most shocking realization? You can build psychological immunity. Every time you feel hurt by someone's words or actions, you're actually being handed a map to your unhealed self. When was the last time you asked yourself, why am I allowing this particular thing to wound me so deeply? The difference between those who suffer repeatedly and those who grow stronger isn't luck or circumstance. It's conscious awareness. You can't control others, but you can control which parts of yourself remain exposed. And here's where our journey takes an even more fascinating turn. These unconscious invitations to pain aren't just weaknesses to eliminate. They're gateways to understanding your deepest self. The vulnerability illusion we've accepted. We're drowning in contradictions. Open up, be vulnerable, share your deepest wounds. But also, set boundaries. Protect yourself. Don't let people walk all over you. How exactly are we supposed to do both? The vulnerability gospel sweeping through our self-help culture sells us a dangerous half-truth. While Brené Brown tells us to leap courageously into openness, Jung would offer a crucial warning. Unexamined vulnerability is psychological suicide. In his essays on the relations between the ego and the unconscious, Jung distinguishes between conscious vulnerability, a strength, and unconscious exposure, a wound waiting to happen. Think of it like your immune system. You don't just fling open all your cellular defenses to every virus passing by, do you? So why do we believe our psyches should operate without similar protections? Your relationships aren't failing because you're not vulnerable enough. They're struggling because you haven't learned which parts of yourself need strategic protection. Look around. Notice how our cultural narratives glorify pain as the necessary price of connection. But what if that's backward? What if properly managed psychological boundaries are actually the foundation of authentic intimacy, not its enemy? This illusion of indiscriminate vulnerability doesn't just set us up for disappointment. It traps us in cycles of harm that feel frustratingly familiar. Shadow integration, your pain's hidden purpose. That person who drives you absolutely crazy? They're holding up a mirror to your shadow. The parts of yourself you've stuffed into psychological storage. Jung's concept of the shadow isn't just some abstract theory. It's the explanation for why specific people can wound you so deeply, while others can't. In Ion, Jung writes that the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. Translation? Your unacknowledged darkness makes you a magnet for specific types of pain. It's no coincidence that across vastly different cultures and throughout history, humans report strikingly similar patterns of psychological wounding. The colleague whose casual comment ruins your entire day isn't randomly pushing your buttons. They're activating precise psychological triggers you've left exposed. You know that ex you still can't get over, despite knowing they were terrible for you? That's not just bad luck or poor judgment. It's unintegrated shadow material screaming for attention. Consider this. What if your most painful relationship patterns are actually sophisticated psychological mechanisms trying to heal you? When you project disowned qualities onto others, your ambition, your selfishness, your need for control, you don't eliminate those qualities. You just lose your ability to recognize them in yourself. And here's where it gets interesting. These projections don't just distort how you see others. They create the very relationship dynamics that hurt you most. The individuation shield, Jung's protection blueprint. What if I told you there's a psychological force field available to you that most people never activate? Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole. And it's your ultimate protection against emotional harm. Unlike popular boundaries advice that treats symptoms rather than causes, Jung's framework addresses the root vulnerability. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he provides a psychological blueprint that's radically different from our quick-fix culture. Think of archetypes as your psychological immune system's specialized cells, each one protecting different aspects of your psyche. Your inner warrior establishes boundaries. Your magician transforms perspective. Your ruler maintains order. But these protections can't function if you've disowned them. Shadow work isn't some woo-woo practice for spiritual retreats. It's the nuts and bolts maintenance your psychological defenses require. When you reject your capacity for anger, your healthy aggression, your need for recognition, you don't eliminate these qualities. You just surrender control of them. Have you noticed how manipulative people seem to target the same vulnerabilities in you again and again? That's not coincidence. They're exploiting the gaps in your psychological integration, the shadows you haven't claimed. And here's where Jung's approach becomes truly transformative. As you integrate these fragmented aspects, you develop an almost supernatural ability to recognize manipulation before it even reaches you. Your unconscious invitation to pain. Let's get uncomfortable. That recurring heartbreak, that repeated betrayal by friends, that boss who reminds you exactly of your last toxic boss. You're unconsciously setting the stage for these dramas. I know that sounds harsh, but Jung's psychological insight offers something far more valuable than comfortable lies. It gives you back your power. In Psychology and Alchemy, Jung observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your recurring wounds aren't bad luck. They're invitations you're unknowingly extending. That friend who consistently dismisses your achievements isn't randomly insensitive. They're playing a role in your psychological theater. The script was written long ago, but you keep casting new actors. Think of your last 3 painful relationship experiences. What was the common thread? It wasn't them. It was the specific wound they each touched in you. This isn't about victim blaming, it's about victim liberating. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it, and you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Have you ever wondered why some people seem mysteriously immune to treatments that devastate you? They're not tougher or luckier. They simply haven't extended that particular invitation. Your recurring pain is actually your shadow's desperate attempt at recognition. What if the very consistency of your suffering is actually your greatest clue to freedom? The things that hurt you most aren't random attacks. They're precise psychological coordinates pointing directly to your healing. Psychological alchemy, transmuting wounds into armor. What if your deepest wounds could become your strongest protection? This isn't inspirational fluff. It's psychological alchemy, the transformative process Jung described in his studies of medieval symbolism. Your recurring pain isn't just suffering to endure. It's raw material waiting to be transformed. Let me show you how this works. First, identify your emotional triggers. Those moments when your reaction vastly exceeds the situation. That disproportionate response? It's your psyche screaming that you've hit unprocessed material. Second, track the pattern. Not just what happened, but the familiar feeling it evokes. That bizarre sense of déjà vu in completely different relationships? That's your psychological gold. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung reveals how unconscious patterns repeat until consciously interrupted. Think of it like this. Your wounds keep speaking the same language until you finally understand the message. The third step is where most people bail out. You must willingly re-experience the pain, but this time as an observer. Feel that knot in your stomach when someone dismisses you? Don't run from it. That sensation is your transformation pathway. Your past hurts aren't just random injuries. They're precise maps to your future immunity. But here's the kicker. This alchemy doesn't just protect you from others. It liberates you from yourself. When you transform your wounds into consciousness, you stop being your own worst enemy. The conscious boundary, building unbreachable walls. Boundaries aren't just lines you draw for others. They're psychological structures you build within yourself. And most of us are trying to create external boundaries while our internal ones are in shambles. Jung understood something modern boundary advice completely misses. True protection doesn't come from rules you impose on others, but from consciousness you develop in yourself. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, Jung describes psychological boundaries not as walls, but as conscious thresholds of awareness. Think about it. Have you ever successfully enforced a boundary with someone who was determined to violate it? The problem isn't your communication. It's that you're playing defense while they're exploiting your blind spots. Real boundaries don't require constant maintenance because they exist at the level of perception, not permission. When you're fully individuated, you instantly recognize a projection for what it is. That criticism that would have crushed you before? It slides right off because you can see it's not actually about you at all. Your colleague's helpful feedback suddenly appears as their own insecurity in high definition. This isn't about becoming callous. It's about becoming conscious. You know you've established true Jungian boundaries when you no longer need to verbally defend them, because your entire being naturally repels what isn't yours to carry. And here's where it gets fascinating. As your conscious boundaries strengthen, you'll notice the manipulative people in your life start to disappear. Not because you're avoiding them, but because you're no longer the target they're looking for. Integration, the ultimate immunity protocol. What would your life look like if you were psychologically bulletproof? Not numb, not disconnected, but genuinely immune to the kinds of harm that once devastated you? Jung's ultimate gift is integration, the complete psychological immunity protocol. In The Undiscovered Self, Jung warns that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Most of us have been playing defense our entire lives, ducking, avoiding, and running from pain. But integration flips the entire game. It's the difference between constantly treating symptoms and actually curing the disease. Here's your comprehensive framework. First, recognize that every painful projection is actually an invitation to wholeness. Second, understand that your unacknowledged shadows aren't just weaknesses, they're untapped power sources. And third, commit to the uncomfortable work of psychological honesty. Most people will do almost anything to avoid looking directly at their own darkness. But you're not most people, are you? Integration isn't a one-time achievement. It's a continuous recalibration of your psychological system. Think of it like this. Your psyche is constantly generating new material through your experiences. Without integration, these fragments become vulnerability points. With integration, they strengthen your immunity. I'm challenging you to completely reframe how you understand emotional protection. What if pain isn't something to guard against, but rather a sophisticated guidance system designed to lead you toward wholeness? What if true immunity doesn't come from building better walls, but from creating a self so whole that it naturally repels what isn't aligned with your truth? This is Jung's radical proposition, that the ultimate protection isn't separation from harm, but integration of all you've disowned.